I think the most beautiful and powerful thing in the world is a repetitive thought.
Right out of the gate, Joe draws a line most people never think to draw. The exact same mental habit that builds your best ideas is also what keeps someone stuck saying I'm unworthy every single day. Then he explains, in plain terms, why that happens in the brain.
But sometimes the most dangerous thing in the world is a repetitive thought.
Absolutely.
And we think about the most beautiful things we create is because we're obsessed with this new idea and this new thought that we want to build something. But at the same time, we know countless people who they have a thought every day that says, I'm unlovable, I'm unworthy, I don't deserve love in my life. If someone's having a negative, repetitive thought, specifically around self-worth, what they believe they deserve in love, where do they start with that thought?
Well, we think primarily 90% of the time we think the same thoughts as we thought the day before. The challenge with that is the thought that you keep thinking over and over again becomes a belief. And nerve cells that fire together wire together. So the more nerve cells fire, the more they develop long-term relationships and the more hardwired they become. The more hardwired they become, the more automatic they are. The more automatic they are, the more unconscious they become. So the process of change really requires becoming conscious of your unconscious thoughts, which means just because you have that thought doesn't necessarily mean it's the truth. If you have that thought and you accept it, you believe it, you surrender to it without analyzing it, that thought will lead to the same choice, which will lead to the same behavior, which will create the same experience, which then will produce the same emotion. The same emotions then drive our very same thoughts. In time, our biology, our neurocircuitry, our neurochemistry, our hormones, and even our gene expression stays the same because we're the same.
So the belief is wired in. That's clip one. Here's the part nobody warns you about. The moment you actually try to change it, your own body pushes back.
So in the process of change, when you come up against that unconscious belief and you make it conscious, most people get uncomfortable when they confront that thought. And they're stopping an automatic process. And the body, which has been conditioned to be the mind because it's doing something over and over again, that's a habit, is craving the experience because it wants the emotion associated with it, right? So the thought of being unworthy produces the feeling of being unworthy. That feeling then, when the person feels unworthy, tends to cause the person to think more unworthy thoughts. And it only takes a thought and a feeling, an image of yourself and an emotion, a stimulus and response, and you can condition the body to memorize that behavior and that emotional state better than the conscious mind. So the moment we inhibit that thought, or the moment we become conscious of it and we no longer accept it, there's a biological craving that takes place in the body because the body has been conditioned to be the mind. So the body starts influencing the mind to think more corresponding thoughts equal to that feeling. So here comes the assault. That you're not only unworthy, you're everything else that goes along with that feeling. And this is where people have to make up their mind if they truly want to change. Because if you decide to confront that thought and make a different choice, get ready because you're going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to feel unfamiliar. And there's going to be some uncertainty because you're stepping out of familiar territory.
So if the old belief fights back, what actually installs a new one? Joe says it's not willpower. It's repetition with intention. And a strange fact about how the brain treats imagination.
What thoughts do I want to fire and wire in my brain? And if a belief is a thought that you keep thinking over and over again, with intention and with attention, you'll switch on that prefrontal cortex and assign meaning to the act and start installing new circuits in your brain. If you keep doing it over and over again, it becomes more hardwired, it becomes more automatic. And now you're installing a new belief that you are worthy of love, you are worthy of abundance, you are worthy to heal, whatever that is. That's the thought you do want to believe in. And when it matters the most is when it's the hardest. Because if you don't have the circuitry in place, you'll default back to the old programs, right? So then if you said, how am I going to be in my Zoom calls today? How am I going to be in traffic today? How am I going to be with my ex, my coworkers? And you started thinking about and rehearsing how you were going to act in certain situations. The brain actually doesn't know the difference between the real life experience and what you're imagining. The research on mental rehearsal shows that the brain will look like in time that it's already had the experience and it's vacant of the experience. Now, keep firing and wiring those circuits and you're going to begin to behave that way.
Here's where Joe pushes back on something a lot of people assume this conversation is about. He draws on his time studying as a monk to explain why just telling yourself something positive isn't the sour. Me is actually rewiring a belief.
When I lived as a monk and studied the Vedas, they would talk about thoughts in different modes. And there are 3 modes: the mode of ignorance, the mode of passion, and the mode of goodness. And there's a hierarchy to those thoughts. And so the mode of ignorance would be an unfulfilling thought or a completely fear or insecurity-based thought, which would be, I am not worthy, or I am unlucky and I can't do that. I can't be in love. No one can be in love with me. That's like a mode of ignorance thought. A mode of passion thought would be, I can be in love with anyone I want and I can find anything. And it's almost like you're lying to yourself and you haven't really applied what you're saying, and it's just this big, bold statement, but it doesn't quite sit and resonate. And the mode of goodness thought is, I can take steps daily to create love in my life right now. And you start to see how people would often look at what we're saying and they think, oh, it's just positive thinking. It isn't. It's not just a false statement. What you're saying is two words you used, intention and attention. You're actually being conscious about where that intention and the attention is being placed. You're intending that if I do something every day and I place my attention on X, Y, Z, then I can create this new reality for myself.
So what does actually applying all of this look like day to day? Joe closes this whole thread with the phrase that ties it together, and a reassurance for when it doesn't work right away.
It's an experiment, right? It's an experiment. Life is an experiment. So if your personality creates your personal reality, and your personality is made up of how you think, how you act, and how you feel, if you keep thinking the same way, you keep acting the same way, you keep feeling the same way, your life is going to stay the same because you're the same. So the experiment is, okay, let me begin to think differently. So I got to remind myself how I do want to think, and I have to remind myself of how I no longer want to think, so I don't default and go unconscious. Let me remind myself how I'm going to behave so that I could actually get my behaviors to match my intentions. And let me remind myself of how I'm going to feel. If I'm able to succeed in that day, then there should be some change in my life. It's the experiment. And if it doesn't change, that doesn't mean the law doesn't work for you. It's just, you're not that good yet. You just got to keep practicing.